Hey everybody, we are back with another incredible episode, and this one is a real treat for me, and I have an incredible treat for you all. I have one of the top. I don't even know. I mean, this guy is a legend when it comes to listings, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to building relationships. And I personally have learned quite a bit from this young man. He has been crushing it for a long, long time. He's crushing it in multiple markets, by the way. So he's crushing it in the Rio Grande Valley and South Texas area. He's crushed it in the Dallas and DFW North area. He's crushed it out in LA and California market. I mean, you talk about someone who is able to implement success, be fruitful, and then multiply. That's who this individual is. So he's a legend and pillar in several different real estate communities, and we have an honor to have him with us today. At one point, he was the number one listing agent at his entire brokerage, the whole thing, right? And again, that's where I came in to learn and to get a hold of this individual and really kind of seep from his brain. I didn't used to really focus on listings, right? But when I was a younger agent, I was like all about buyer's agents. And then they gave me a job, gave me a role as a listing agent. So I wanted to find the best listing agent, someone that was doing it at a super high level, someone that's doing over 100 transactions a year. I want you to stop for just 1 minute and think about what it would do for your business if you did over 100 listings in 1 year. In one 12-month period, what would that do for your business? What would that do for your family? What would that do for your lifestyle? And when I had the opportunity to come into this company, and I saw the type of business he was doing, I was like, I want to not only be like him, but I want to beat him. So I didn't start by being like him and doing the exact thing that he does, and then from there I can try to beat him, which I did. But I'm sure we won't talk about that when we get on here, but it's all good. So without further ado, I want to introduce Roddy de la Garza. He is absolutely incredible. He's one of our managing brokers, also with EXP here in RGV in South Texas. Hey, Roddy, how are you, sir? How are things?
I'm great, Tony. How are you? This is such
I
a
am
such a
out.
privilege and really fun to connect with you on this level again.
Yes, sir. It is, and thank you again for coming on and sharing some wisdom with agents. I'll tell you a secret about Roddy. Roddy was on my list, right? And you may want to start your notes with this. You all make a list. Make a list. So every agent should have two lists. Right now, I'm talking to EXP agents, but you should have a list of agents that you want to join you on your success journey. You should also have a list of every person that you know. When I did my list of real estate agents that I know that I would love to work with, Roddy was at the top of that list. And you should really have that list and start dripping. Don't let up. Every single month, Roddy was hearing from me. Hey, how's it going, man? How's it going? How's business? I was just loving on him and telling him that I appreciate him and everything that he's done, for me and with me throughout my real estate career, and just in doing that and be authentic, right? And I think that's the key to everyone at EXP wants to know, what's the key to attraction? It's just relationships, and it's just drip. It's just dripping and loving on people and caring about their success. And I think that's really the key. And then when push comes to shove and that time comes around, that's where you get the phone call. So don't be pushy, don't EXP on people, as we know, but just have conversations, build relationships. So Roddy was like the number one name on my list. So I was super excited when he was ready to come on board. But Roddy, introduce yourself to anyone that doesn't know you or hasn't interacted with you. There may be like 7 people in the whole country that you haven't done a deal with, but introduce yourself to those 7 people.
Thank you, Tony. First off, let me just say that one of the best parts about your attraction was not just telling me how successful you were and EXP was, but it was listening to me, right? That was the difference that I got from the different folks, because certainly I'd been approached in many ways to join EXP. But to have someone to really listen to me and then integrate what it is that I saw for the future of my career, made it so that I couldn't turn down the opportunity to be a part of this great culture. So I just want to say thank you to you for taking the time, not just to project, but to attract me in by listening. So thank you.
I love it. And I learned that from you, man. Shut up and listen.
Yeah. But my name is Roddy de la Garza. I've been first licensed in Texas in 1993. So that'll be the 31st year anniversary of my first license in real estate. And I grew up in a small town called Harlingen, Texas. I love Harlingen in the Rio Grande Valley, and grew up in a family brokerage. So almost my entire real estate career, I worked for a small independent brokerage. My parents have a commercial property management and residential brokerage in Texas that is also 51 years old this year. And And so I grew up in that environment, never having to attach myself to any kind of brokerage or particular franchise. And Tony and I connected when I first took my first job with another brokerage. I went in as a listing specialist at Redfin in Dallas market because I was just new to entering that market. It was my first opportunity to be in two markets at once, right? Back in 2014, I believe it was. But needless to say, it was the beginning of the fintech industry, technology meeting real estate, and it was very exciting. And what I will tell you is, yes, the first year I sold 108 houses. And the thing I will also tell you is that at that time, anybody in real estate, when it comes to the next person coming up behind them, it was thrilling to see Tony defeat that record and then see other agents come in and defeat those records. You know, it's so great to see the success of the future generations. I got the opportunity to transfer with Redfin to LA, and very similarly, had a great successful launch in LA, and then eventually Palm Springs as well. About 90% of my business is listings.
That's incredible. And you probably have been on, and this was the guidance I think I got from you when I was shadowing you. I was like, I want to learn everything. And now I call that, which is, I stole from Tony Robbins, which is the total immersion success strategy, right? Total immersion and just soaking up everything I can. But I remember when I asked Roddy, I was like, man, how do I get to the point where I can do over 100 transactions in a 12-month period? And then you were like, don't turn anything down, right? Take every listing appointment. And at that point, you were, I think, the only listing agent in the whole DFW area. And then that's what I came in to be as well. So I was going everywhere. It's like, I remember Roddy said, don't turn anything down. Take every appointment you can get, every shadow, because, and really what you do is you shorten that learning curve by sheer volume, by sheer numbers. I think I might've went on 300 listing appointments my first year to get, that 118 or whatever it was. And that was something I lived by. So that's something else for y'all's notes. It takes reps. Get the reps in. Do as many as you can, as much as you can, as often as you can. When you're not doing a listing appointment, you should be shadowing someone doing a listing appointment, and that's how you become good at listings. You're gonna be bad until you're good, but don't be afraid to be bad, right? You have to be bad in order to be good. So again, I would encourage everyone to put that in your notes for today. Find someone, mentor with someone, reach out to Roddy, reach out to someone that's on your team or a mentor, and follow them as they do what it is that you're wanting to do. So let's kind of start from the beginning, Roddy, on listings, right? So you've done, I don't even know, how many listing appointments would you say that you've been on? Approximately. I know it's tough to judge, but
I'd say at least 2,000. If not
2,000 listing appointments. That is incredible. So give us, I think, maybe the top 5 or so I guess actionable things or top 5 points that you would want to give someone on how to win listings, right? So we're talking now about the folks that when they show up at the door, or does it begin before that? I know there's a lot of stuff that you do even before you get to the door to begin that listing consultation, that listing appointment. But if y'all want lead generation, we got plenty of videos on lead generation on how to get that listing appointment. But this is going to be a masterclass on what to do once they've scheduled that listing appointment. Roddy, take us from there.
I think, thank you, Tony. And as soon as you get the listing appointment, I start doing my research, right? And that includes making sure that I have a good quality conversation with the contact. So I'll call that person just to verify that I am speaking with the actual decision maker, what their goals are, and understanding, what the current situation is with the property, because you're going to approach things differently if it's the actual owner, if it's a trustee, if it's a probate attorney, if the situation's a divorce. I want to walk into there about 80% prepared for what I'm going to be talking about with them, right? So researching that property in MLS, pulling the appraisal district records, looking at the comps, kind of getting an idea of what's going on with their situation, and then preparing myself so that I have everything available to me, even though I may not access everything, because I want to be very authentic and organic in the moment with them. But I want to be able to show them that I'm prepared by pulling out different aspects of the collateral or promotional material I may have that suit up to their questions. Because my idea when I show up there, and this is the second part, is listen. So be prepared and then listen. I think a lot of agents show up at a listing appointment and kind of just throw up on the kitchen table is what I call it. They get to the table and they're like, I'm the greatest, I'm number one, or my team is the greatest, we do the most, and all of this kind of stuff. But not very many people sit down. And this is one of the things I started doing after doing all those consults and seeing what worked, is I just sit down and the first thing I say is, can you tell me a little bit about why I'm here? And then I'm just quiet. Why did you want to speak to a realtor today? And then I just let them talk. And I let them tell me what's going on. I focus in on what their number one goal is, where they envision what I call the future promise, what happens after you sell this property, any privileged or confidential information about a change in life situation. And I just listen and then I thank them. And then based on that, we start to having the further conversation. And the next thing I like to do is say,
Whoa, 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 whoa!
oh,
You're already too far down the road, man. You're already dropping
okay,
so many nuggets along the way. So I think each one of those things could be an hour seminar. But I
oh,
want to go back
wow,
to just a few of them. But
okay,
before we get too far down the road, right? So we talk about prep. Or even before that, goodness, the decision maker conversation. I
mm-hmm.
can't tell you how many agents fail in that category. And that category is talking with someone that never had the ability to say yes, but anyone has the ability to say no, but you have to make sure you're talking to the person that has the ability to say yes. And I see a lot of new agents. I see even a lot of experienced agents. They assume. And we know what happens when we assume, right?
Yes,
So what happens is that they presume that the person they're talking to is their decision maker when ultimately it may not be. And even in some cases, just because their name is on the title doesn't necessarily mean that person is the decision maker either, right? So you want to make sure that every person that has a weigh in on this decision is going to be present. And if that means rescheduling their listing appointment, it means rescheduling the listing appointment, right? So that you can put yourself in a situation where, you can not only have one conversation and then have to have another one, but you can have that one conversation one time. And that's how you leverage your time and do one listing appointments instead of 3, 4, 5 listing appointments in a row. So that's one thing I want to talk about. And then additionally, Roddy, and I love this, right? Because it's the exact opposite of the way that I did my listing presentations and my consultations after I soaked up Roddy's brain. You're right. Because and I'm a firm believer in getting both sides of the story and then making your own mind up, right? And until you've reached the level of success that someone else has reached, you should be copying, right? The R&D department, as Leo likes to say, is rip off and duplicate. So rip off and duplicate that person's success until you get to that level. Then you start bringing in your own stuff and kind of tweaking it. So with my listing appointments, I'm like Batman. I want to have like the utility belt with every single thing I could ever possibly need, because that gives me a sense of comfort. That gives me a sense of like, hey, no matter what they pull out, I know I've got an answer for it. I've got something I can pull out of my utility belt. But what I love about Roddy and when I was shadowing him is that he's completely, I like to say, clean, right? So he walks into a listing appointment with full confidence, and he's the only person I've ever really seen do this, y'all. Who'll walk into a listing with nothing in his hand, maybe a folder, but other than that, it's just a conversation. And I've seen him do this and with full confidence and say, "Hey, why am I here?" and shut up. Why am I here? And shut up and just let them talk and let them tell you. And it's like, I remember after I shadowed him the first time, we left the appointment. I was like, man, you didn't tell him about this. You didn't tell him about the HDR photography. You didn't tell him about the Matterport 3D scan. You didn't tell him about this, tell him about that. He's like, they didn't ask. Right. That wasn't important to them. What they were looking for is an agent that's going to do this and an agent that's going to do that. You didn't tell them how many houses you sold, Roddy. You did over 100 houses last year. You never even brought that up. It wasn't important, right? So that's a mastery level of communication. So can you go a little bit deeper into that, Roddy, and the mindset behind it? I know you've done it so much it just kind of rolls off your tongue, but talk to us a little bit about the mindset behind this going into a listing appointment completely clean with open ears.
Sure. I think the idea is again not to assume anything, right? Not to assume what's going on in the situation, and to show up letting people know that you're there to be of the highest and best use, right? You're there to serve them and know. And I also want to stand out from all the other agents who are doing the opposite of what I do.
That's big.
And I want to also show my value, right? And the thing is I kind of see that first listing consultation like a first date. My goal is to get the second date. If I want to see them again, I want to get the second date. So the important thing is to come in, and even though I have everything prepared, I only present it when they the topic comes up so that they can see that I've got solution after solution lined up, right? It's always better to deliberate as soon as they ask for it than to give them something that they're not interested in, is what I have learned, you know? And the idea there is to be very connected and in the moment with them. And also to always leave them wanting to know more. So if you
I
want to,
love
every
it.
time you talk to them, if you leave them something new that they didn't know, they're going to inherently want to look forward to the next time they're going to talk to you, right? So if you just leave a few little crumbs every time, they just continue to come in, and you make it symbiotic too. Like, I think you might remember this term, Tony, is I give them homework. You know, is one of the things that I always
I love
say
it.
is
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
leave the
yeah.
console. I'll say, look, let's say that I'm not sure I'm talking to the decision maker. I'll say, your homework is to find out if you have a copy of the death certificate and if things have been through probate. My homework is I'm going to pull a title prelim and I'm going to do an estimated net sheet based upon what we talked about today, for example. But we can't do a listing agreement until we have an idea of who the actual signer of that needs to be. So let's reconnect Thursday at 3 o'clock. And we're going to bring our homework together and we'll have an answer to the next step. And then just keep that. That's also part of it, is by doing that, I assume I have the job. So it's harder for them to say no to me, because every time I see them, I just assume that I'm working for them and they start to look forward to that. But I find that, yeah, like I'm always prepared for everything, but I don't show them everything.
I love it. I love it. And you also have a pretty unique philosophy, I think, on leaving collateral behind, right? So can you kind of talk about that, right? So as you talk about your homework process.
Mm-hmm. I do. That's one of the things I'm surprised you remember that. I asked them, I said, would you like me to leave this or would you like me to email it to you? You know, is one of the other things that I asked, because I'm conscious of folks' ability to just have stuff piled up. Also, it's a little protective for me in regards that I don't want my unique proposals or valuations or things like that to to get spread around, because at one time everyone wanted to know what is he doing and how does he do it, right? So it's a part of that. I only leave what's essential, but I always make sure they have everything electronically, because it's a great way to follow up too and say, hey, here's everything that we reviewed today. But be conscious of whether or not they want a bunch of collateral left behind, because I find a lot of people do not.
I love it. I love it. And again, you were talking about getting being set apart from what everyone else is doing, right? And everyone else is
Mm-hmm.
leaving. Oh, you know, and again, you do both of them, see which one works for you, right? But there are some folks that want to leave the, you know, I want to buy the fanciest brochure. I've seen for a high end listing, folks will leave a leather binder folio, right, and say, hey, this is what what we're going to provide for you, and so on, right? But maybe try both. But I think that that's a very unique strategy, and it's that same mentality of being desired, right? And leaving them wanting more, right? Now they're expecting something from you to continue the conversation. And sometimes it can help you understand where you're at, right? If they've already interviewed with other agents or whatever the case is, it can tell you where you're at. If they say, yeah, no, don't worry about it, that kind of leaves you figuring where you're at and what maybe you need to change the strategy going forward.
And I wouldn't say that I do that on every consultation, because sometimes in that initial conversation, you get an idea of that seller and what they're going to expect, either based upon price point questions, who's going to be present at the consultation. So there are times that I prepare a beautiful binder and, a whole marketing plan and things like that. But there are other times that I do not, because we're not to that level yet. Anything that I prepare would be premature to some of the basic questions that I need answered in order to help them.
That I love it. I love it. So take us kind of through the next step, right? So you're at the listing consultation, you're having these conversations. I think you also have a unique strategy on where you sit, right? And I think this is key. Or do you stand, right? Are you standing in the kitchen? Are we sitting at the table? If we're sitting, where are we sitting? Every single thing matters, and I think that you've done a great job throughout your career in over 2,000-3,000 listings, consultations of orchestrating this process. So can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, I definitely see myself as a guest in the home. So one of the first things that I'll do when we arrive is I typically ask, may I put my bag down, right? And I set my bag down, and whether or not they want me to have my shoes on or off. We kind of settle into that. And then I'll say, like, hey, would you tour me through the house? Let's pretend that this is the first time you're showing the house off after you purchased it. What were the things that you fell in love with? What were the things you planned to change? What were the things you changed? Tell me the love story of you in this home. And then we tour through the house, right? And then we see it. And then when we sit down to wrap up, I talk to them a little bit about, I say, if you listed the house with me, this is how I would conduct that tour, right? And then I kind of do it based upon how the flow of the house is and what are the most impressive points and how do we end up back in, like, say, one of the nicest rooms, either the kitchen, living room, or dining room. But I do plan on talking about how I will tour through the home with them. I tend not to take the best seat in the house, if that's what you're referring to. I ask, I kind of ask shall we sit? But I want to also make sure that I focus and I'm in a position where I'm able to acknowledge each person that's present. And that includes children and even fur babies. You want to acknowledge everyone that's present so that you fit into the atmosphere, right? And they remember that as well too. And I'm really good at remembering clients' names and their kids' names and their pets' names. I think that's really important, right? But I do sit within an area where it feels like their uncle has come to visit, not the real estate agent has come to visit, and I follow their lead. And I think the important thing that I've learned too is don't assume who the decision maker is. So give everybody good equal attention. Make sure that your eyes are on both sets of the couple, or if grandma is there as well as the couple, then you want to also acknowledge grandma's presence and talk, because you don't know who's the main factor and decision maker throughout the process. So a good thing to do in that initial conversation is ask. And that's the other thing that I think is important, is mastering straight questions and difficult conversations is really important for all agents to succeed, because it's just the thing that you have to be able to do. Who's the decision maker? How long do you have before foreclosure is called in? What happens if we don't? You have to ask these questions now, right? While they're in it, so that they can then see that you know what you're doing to be able to get them to the next step. There's no service work involved if you can't start getting your hands dirty. Just dig in there and start fixing things for them.
Absolutely. And I love, I think in another area where you display particular mastery is in the types of questions that you ask. So what are some of those most important questions that you would advise agents to be asking as they're touring? And I love the first one, right? Give me a tour of the home. Treat me like, and I think you used to say mother-in-law, right? Treat me like I'm your mother-in-law, right? And sometimes I get them to laugh and take it, and then you kind of, and give them the walk through the house, and they tell you, again, you're focusing on letting them speak, right? Not about you, not talking to them, not saying, oh, you need to replace the granite countertops and, this popcorn paint job's terrible and whatever. That's not what it's letting them kind of guide the experience, and you just display your professionalism and focus on building the relationship. Because if you focus on building a relationship, the sales is going to happen, right? Just through a matter of the question making. But what you really can stand out in is being relatable and being a friend, and that's who they want to use as their agent. So what are some of the best questions to ask on a listing appointment?
I think some of the best question that I like to ask is, it's two-part, is what did you do to the home since you purchased it that helped you make it more of the home you wanted it to be? And if you were to stay here another 5 years, what are the things that need attention, right?
Yeah.
And that way they can then tell me that. And I just make mental note of it as we tour, because then what I'll do is when we sit down, I compliment them on the things they did well. I think adding a fully paid off solar system is fantastic for this listing. Or I'm so glad that you maintained your air conditioner twice a year since you've installed it, right? And then the things that they tell me about, and they say, well, I would have remodeled the kitchen, or I would have redone the sewer line. I can help guide them in the hierarchy of that sewer line may be something that comes up as a conversation, but the kitchen is less of a priority for someone who may want to come in, purchase this at the right price, and remodel it into their own kitchen. So I listen to them, and then I give it back to them with solutions. I think one of my stories, I don't know if you were there with me, Tony, or if I told you about it, but I had this lady in a consultation in Dallas, and her son had broken the double glass in the oven with a little car, a kid's Hot Wheels car. And she's like, I don't know how I'm going to get this fixed. This has been bothering me for 5 years that he had this broken. Only one of them was broken, not the second level of glass. And so I said, well, you know what? Let me find out right now. And I used an app on my phone to take a picture, send it out, got it fixed. And I said, I'll have some answers for you, later today. Well, by the time we finished the consult, I had 3 different vendors who had sent me replies back on how they could get it fixed and by when. And by being that responsive to her in that moment, I got her to sign the listing agreement right there. I said, I can have the repairman here for you, and it's going to cost about $400, and they're just impressed with
Yeah.
that.
No, and I think that's incredible. And I think that, let's even go deeper on that, right? And I don't know if that app is still around, but like there's Angie's List, there's a number of apps out there now where you can, what is it, Task Monkey or something, or Task Rabbit? I don't know, but there are other apps that are out there that you can do that same thing with. What was that, with Thumbtack, or what was
That's
that?
I use primarily Thumbtack and Angie, but there's also Home Advisor, and
Yep.
House is another one. Yeah.
That's big, y'all. So again, if you're taking notes, jot that down. These are things that are going to sweep the client off their feet. And even if they interview with 7 agents, I guarantee that not one of them had a list of vendors to provide for them before the consult was over. Again, these are things that to do to stand out, and it took them no time at all. You take a picture of it, upload it on Angie, and then you continue on with the home tour, continue on with the conversation, and the bids are coming in instantly. And you say, hey, yeah,
Right.
no, I've got 3 contractors right here. They'll take care of it. And by the way, this is exact cost, an estimate that you can hold them to. And here's their reviews. Right. So again, you're doing these things to really stand out. So I love that process of showing them as opposed to telling them, because any agent will say, yeah, sure, I can help you. I can help you find someone, and then, and it may or may not happen. So when you demonstrate your value on that listing appointment, that can be, beyond valuable. So now, what other questions should they be asking on a listing consultation?
I think, well, one of the things that you should plan is to ask and have a conversation about is whether or not they are willing to invest time and money into preparing the house for market, or finding out what the situation is, or if they want to just proceed forward as is, right? So I always have a conversation with them about current value just as is, and then a proposed value that I recommend based upon my experience, right? So getting to the top end of the comps, or staying in the lower end of the comps based upon their willingness. And that's usually based upon how much time they have to sell and what their future promise is. Like if they need to be in Denver by the start of the school year, that might be different than they say, oh, we don't want to move until the end of the year. So figuring out that timeline and willingness to commit is important as well.
I
And
love
I,
that. I love that.
yeah.
Before you move on from that, let's go back
Mhm.
for just a moment. And I love the question about, if you were to stay here, what would you do to the property, or what needs to be
Mhm.
done? And the reason why I love that is that it's such a non-confrontational way, right, to get around to what are the damages to the home, or what things need to be taken care of, as opposed to asking them like, hey, what's broken, around here, or
Mhm.
hey, what do we need to disclose? That's a whole different way of going about it. And what I love about it is that you almost can't lose in asking that question, because when you ask them, hey, if you were to stay, what would you do, or what do you think needs to be done? That's going to start in their mind, they can start putting together or realigning their expectations, right? Because they know, right? And they
Mhm.
start to realign those expectations, and it puts you in a situation where you're able to agree and say, hey, I agree 100%. I do think that, we may want to take a look at upgrading the appliances to stainless steel or something, right? Or conversely, it allows you to come across and be even more on their side as a professional and say, actually, I don't think we need to do that at all, right? Depending on where we price, I think that, this may be very appropriate for this demographic, right? So having those conversations, again, you can't lose whether you agree with them or disagree with them. You still end up on their side, and it's all based on how you phrase the question. So I absolutely love that, Roddy.
And do take ownership of it as well too. If they tell you that they've been avoiding the leak in the garage, that's going on in the ceiling, take ownership and say, well, you should get that looked into, because they're going to call their sister, their friend, their someone else, and then that person's going to say, oh wait, I have a realtor. Let me introduce you
See?
to. So what I do instead is I say, hey, I said, what if I get you a list of 3? I'll get you a list of 3 roofers who may be available, and I'll even be here when they come, if that makes you feel better. Because what you want to do is you want to get them to boldly go into the things that they have been delaying upon addressing, right? Because that's going to give them the freedom to move into the sale. And then I want to also be the person that they feel close to about these things, and offer them the advice. So a lot of times I'll offer to be present. There was a time period where I was doing a lot of houses with sellers that were remote in the Palm Springs market and Coachella Valley market. There were sellers that I never met. So me and my team, we would meet there. We would keep people on video. We would take care of lining up the 3 estimates. We just made it so that they didn't have to go to anyone else unless it involved something like taxes or title or financing, something specific, legal issues, then we refer off to those. But we still typically provide those introductions, but we don't try to solve things that are outside of our wheelhouse.
I absolutely love that. And, again, when you're there and you can take a picture of the roof and where it's leaking and then just
Mhm.
simply share that with your contractors and keep going. Again, there's just massive value there. So, any other questions that you think are imperative and can really help move the needle for agents that are struggling to win the listing once they've got there?
I'll tell you a couple things that I've noticed have really set it up so that the client knows I'm on their side, because that's the one thing they really want to know. Is I will ask them, how long have you owned the home? And they'll be like, oh, a year and a half. And I said, have you discussed capital gains tax exemption with your accountant? And they'll be like, well, you're the third realtor who has come in here and you haven't brought that up. They haven't brought that up. And I said, well, you should look into it, because it'll make a difference on if we close before or after your anniversary date in this house. You should have a conversation. So they like the idea to look into that stuff, and you can verify. If it's an investment property, what do you plan to do with the proceeds? Do you need a 1031 tax deferred exchange advisor? You want to tell them that that this is going to have an impact on them, and are they prepared, and have they thought out that impact, right? So being there for that is really important. And then the other one that I would say, I'm trying to remember what I was going to tell you. There's the what's going to happen with the proceeds, and maybe it'll come back to me, but let's proceed forward.
Sure. And another analogy that I love that you used, and tell me if you've used this or if you upgraded to something else, but this analogy of being was it the pilot or the doctor? I think I've heard both, right? So where you're either the pilot or you're the doctor that's landing the plane, right? But you have the stewardesses that are taking care of kind of the day-to-day thing, or otherwise you're the doctor, right? And the doctor is going to be the one that actually come up with the treatment plan, but the nurses are going to be the ones that's your team, and your nurses teams are going to handle all of those day-to-day functions and making sure you got the right meds and making sure all these other things happen, but it's under your direction as their chief physician. So which one was your analogy? I can't remember which.
I use both, but in a slightly different way. I do say the sales experience is going to be like, I'm your pilot. I do use that we're going, at times there'll be people on my team who may host a showing or an open house or do a delivery or install the sign. That's my ground crew and flight attendant team. And I will assign a co-pilot, someone who's primarily responsible for your secondary experience if I am not available, right? And then my transaction coordinator is our ground control. It's the person in the terminal bringing us in for landing. And people can really get that idea of what it means. When I talk about the doctor thing, I think what you're referring to is when I go into it started with going into a different neighborhood, then going into a different city, and then really going into a different state. People would always say to me, things like, well, have you ever sold a house in Beverly Hills before? Have you ever sold a house in Plano before? They would come and ask me these questions, and I would be like, well, I said, I have a real estate license, and me and my team have sold this many houses. And I'll go back to I said, what do you do for a living, sir? And they'll be like, well, this is the one that he said to me. He goes, well, I'm a heart surgeon. And I'm like, well, can you practice heart surgery in Dallas while you're in? He goes, well, yes, I can. I said, I can do real estate here with me and my team. I said, we can provide you the same services everywhere. So I think that maybe what you're alluding to is that when I use the medical idea, it's the idea of whatever you're skilled at, you can take it somewhere else if you have the right support and what support you need. I did remember the other thing I was going to talk about what you can offer the client that no one else is talking about is I do talk to them too. Are you sure you want to sell this house? Are you capable of keeping this house at a 3% interest rate where you have $200,000 worth of equity? Should you be selling this or should you rent it? And I do have those conversations because I want them to know that so many times people don't want to tell you, well, we may rent this or we may not sell. But if you tell them what all their options are, and then you can find a way to make it possible. Because I've had people before I had a dentist, it was my personal dentist recently, and he told me that he had been through an experience with an agent and it didn't end successfully. And he said, they told me that we had to sell this property and we couldn't find a buyer, et cetera. And I said, well, why did you have to sell it? He said, well, to get access to this equity. How much equity do you have? And then he told me, and I was like, can I come over for coffee this weekend? So I went over for coffee this weekend, and we found out that the other agent had not presented him the idea of renting it, leveraging and reducing that debt, taking 70% of that rental to then go on to the new property. And within 3 weeks, I had his condo rented and had them in a new property,
Wow.
that in the
Wow.
school district that they wanted. But it's important to know that they can come to you with any questions. And it's not, I never want to appear as if I'm chasing a commission check. I'm chasing a good review. I want them to tell all their friends about me, right? And that's the way you do it, is by making sure that they know that you're aware of all their options.
I love it. So, and you begin with the end in mind. And if you want that end to be a raving fan, you approach it much differently than you'd approach it in, I just want to get the listing. Because the problem is, a lot of times people say, I want to get the listing, and they get the listing, but that's it. And it doesn't sell. And they certainly don't have a raving fan at that point, right? Where if you go into it and saying, hey, I want to create an experience that this person's going to tell everyone that they know about me, you approach every single thing differently along that process. And that's what you end up with. That's the goal that you end up achieving, which is them telling everyone about you. So I absolutely love that.
And I think also to take that consultation with the authority that you're both interviewing each other, right? So many agents show up just willing to do almost anything to get the sign in the yard, overpricing the listing, not having things fixed, leaving a lot of dry rot available or viewable in an area where an FHA or VA loan would be a perfect match. So there's different things like that where you may have to ask yourself, do I have the bandwidth to take this on? Because it's often sometimes that I have told people, I'm not comfortable moving forward at that price or without these things addressed. But I do want you to know that if we can come up with a solution on that or an agreement on how we'll reevaluate it, I'm here to help you. And I can tell you that the majority of the time they come right back, or I've learned also that if I take the listing with those compromising issues, I'm not successful with it, but the next realtor is, after they've addressed the issues that I've done. It goes back to the old adage of you want to be the first kiss, the second spouse, and the third realtor. when people are difficult like that, when they're not being realistic to what the market is going to do. So be willing to interview both ways, because that sense of, they're going to respond to your sense of confidence is what I think too.
I love that notion. And I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into that. In a couple areas. Number one, pricing, right? Because this is going to maybe transition more into objection handling. But when we talk about pricing, and there's two schools of thought on this, right? So, and I've interviewed many top producing agents, right? I've had Elizabeth Riley, for instance. I've had Nolly here, and they both have two different schools of thought. So I'm interested to hear your thought process on it. Some agents say never take an overpriced listing, right? If you have an unreasonable seller, then you need to part ways with them, right? And we'll talk about how to go about that if you think we should do other way. The other way is, take every listing that you can get, right? And make sure that you are setting milestones, right? Because they've tried that process of walking away from a listing only to see someone else take that listing and then do a price reduction, and they end up selling it at the same price, right? So what's your school of thought? Which one do you subscribe to, or is there a happy medium?
Well, I'm going to come in as the first one to tell you, right in the middle, evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. Take every consultations. No, it's take every consult, but just like every buyer, and each house is a unique opportunity. Is this the right buyer for this, the right house, under which terms? You have to take it on each listing. You have to kind of go, does the nature of this conversation and my relationship with this seller rhyme with the idea of success if I follow this pattern, right? So you kind of have to trust your instincts. And if you're a new agent, this current market and the way things are changing, you have to attach yourself to a star. You have to attach yourself to someone in the market, I believe, who can offer you that guidance as a mentor, right? To tell you about what things are like in particular neighborhoods, and making sure that you're interpreting the price correctly, the size of the lot, the location of the lot, the directional facing of the house, the fact that it has certain improvements, and things like that. You have to make sure that your pricing is accurate. There have been times where I have underpriced something and it sold, where I thought we were at the high end and something sold much higher, right? And you have to look and learn from those situations. So I sometimes, it sometimes gets the idea of, will they price it? And if I take that price, still let me be in control fundamentally, of this process, or do they want to retain all the control? And that's usually where I would separate myself. If I feel like I'm not going to have a voice and they just want an insertion into MLS, I probably would not take that overpriced listing.
I
If I
love it.
feel
And then
collaborative, then I probably would take the overpriced listing and explain to them, what my process is, but that they're the key, that I follow their decisions.
so, and then do you insert into your listing agreements then this kind of this self-executing price reduction?
I have in the past, right? Put in like, if we don't have any offers by week 4, we'll do this or do that. But I also find that I have to be organic to the market response too. So I think clear communication rather than having to simply insert it into the agreement. Maybe if it's like a trust or there's an attorney involved or there's 5 decision makers, you might want to put it into the agreement. But if you've got a good relationship with someone and you're communicating with them at least a couple of times a week about how the market is responding, et cetera, I think it's best to be organic in the moment and authentic to what the market is telling you. And clients will also change their minds sometimes within the first couple of weeks once they start getting feedback and seeing the action on the house.
And how many times did that happen where, you're like, the client calls you and says, hey, do you think we're overpriced? Right. And sometimes the answer is, I told you we're overpriced 3 weeks ago. And other times, it's like, no, just stay the course. It hasn't been that long yet. Calm down. Right. Put your, blinders on and plug your ears. Don't worry about anything until we have at least this many listings. So I think that I love that advice of really taking each one by case basis, as opposed to a prescription that applies to everyone. Right. Everybody gets some, Ambien or whatever. Right. So,
and it's also important.
that.
I agree, and I think that one of the things I used to do when I was doing such a high volume of listing consultations was out front of the house before I went in to the house. My phone would be going crazy. I had another listing consultation in 3 hours on the other side of town. Is I would just center myself and just be like, for the next 90 minutes, everything is about the Williams family. Everything is about this house. I don't pay attention to my phone. I don't check my text messages. I don't get distracted on the option period that's going to end tonight and they haven't responded. I'm not going to do anything except focus on this family and be very present in that moment. And then kind of see, when you show up like that, you can make these decisions that are on a case-by-case basis by being present. Don't bring the ghosts of other transactions in. Bring the key element facts, right? I call that the things that rhyme in a transaction. Bring those, but don't bring the personalities and issues of a previous transaction that aren't actually involved in this property here. So I walk in with a very authentic, centered, and open mind to how to help these people, And that's what I mean by a case-by-case basis will present itself to you.
I love it. And then one of the things that I've seen you do as well, so as we kind of talk about price a little bit, is you like to play a game, right? Sometimes with the pricing. And so can you go through that a little bit?
Yeah, this is a good one because sometimes you get the sense that they don't want to tell you what price they have in mind. There's all kinds of different situations on the comp. So one of the last things I'll do is I'll give both partners or both spouses a piece of paper, and then I'll have one, and I'll say, okay, everybody, write the list price that you think it should be. On the, we've reviewed the comps. I've showed them the price per square foot. We've discussed the prices and minuses about the property. And then I'll have everyone write down a price. And then at the same time, we all flip it over. And then by having that completely open, right, to everyone and their willingness to do that, you can kind of see where you stand if you have any chance at all and what conversations need to be had, because most of the times we're within a certain amount from each other that's not too unrealistic. And then sometimes it's way off. And if it's way off, then you've got a clear indication there that what you're doing needs to be readdressed.
Yeah. And it helps to de-escalate. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It always works for me, though. People appreciate that. And if they won't play the game, something.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, it helps to de-escalate what can be a stressful situation, right? And, one of the ways that I would go about this in my listing appointments is I'd say, listen, there's three things you're looking for. You're looking for someone's going to market the property. You're looking to price it, and then commissions, right? So that's really the three things we're going to talk about: marketing, and I'm going to tell you all about our marketing plan. Then you're going to want to talk about what the commission structure looks like and the pricing. The good news is that you get to pick two of those things, right? You get to pick how much we're going to pay in commission, and then you get to pick what the price point is going to be. My piece is just explain the marketing to you, and then we're going to get started. And I think that game kind of fits right in there because it fully puts them in the driver's seat and says, I'm never going to sell this home for less than you want to sell it for. So dismiss, right. I just want to dismiss all of your concerns right now. Let's get the price stuff out of the way. I know that because a lot of times in listing appointments, they've got this big price, like black cloud hanging over their head. And they're like, get to the price, Tony, get to the price. And it can be stressful for the listing agent. And in many cases, the seller's not even listening, right? They want to hear the price. Give me the price, right? So when you go in and you start from the beginning and say, look, don't worry about the price. You're going to pick the price. Don't worry about it, right? And then as long as it's within reason, we're going to work with you. And then the commission, same thing. So I think that's another strategy that agents can use in their tool belts. And then, I love the idea of, again, playing a game with them to help de-escalate this black cloud of, oh my God, what's the price going to be that can be hovering over them.
I did a listing consult in Palm Springs when I went and opened that market for my brokerage and grew it from no agents to about 30 agents in the first year. And I was going to one of my first listing consults, and I walk in, and there's three fellas sitting on one end of a table, and then there's me, and there's collateral from about four other brokers that have been there already today. So it was kind of like pressure. A job interview session, and these guys are already a little into happy hour, so they've got this situation going. I could feel the pressure, right? And so I diffused the pressure. I walked in, I just said, well, it looks like you've got a lot of opinions on your value today. I said, what have you not heard that's kept you from hiring someone? And I just answered the question right there. What are you waiting to hear that you haven't heard from someone else today? And they just started talking and telling me, and I gave them all the questions. I said, if we sign paperwork right now, and this is one of them that I did at the table, will you move forward with me? Right? Because I got them to address the three things they wanted: internet marketing, open house hosting, things like that. I said, if I address those three things right now, will you sign the listing agreement with me? And they loved that boldness, right? And they all were out-of-town sellers that have turned into repeat referral customers and Facebook friends, So it's kind of interesting that just address the black elephant, what's it called? The white elephant in the room, address that thing that no one wants to talk about, and people will remember you because you have to address those things. The other thing I like to say is, I know who my competition is, probably. I said, it's the neighborhood expert, and it's your friend and family member who just got their real estate license. I said, so before you make a decision with either of those, come back to me. And if it's not the neighborhood expert, then I'll say it's the person offering you least commission. It's the friend or family member who just got their real estate license, and me, because sometimes I'm the neighborhood expert. So you just kind of have to name it out there and make a commitment to them to say, will you please, before you make a decision, do me the favor of coming back to me to discuss that? And if I don't get the listing, I want to know why. So I follow up with that too, because sometimes, if that listing doesn't succeed the first go round, they remember me and they come back to me.
Wow. No, that's so powerful, Roddy. And, this whole notion of just being bold and getting directly to the heart of the issue. Everyone as well. I mean, again, if you're taking notes here, one of the biggest notes, and this is one of the best, I guess, strategy scripts. It's not really a script, but it's such a powerful phrase that everyone should be utilizing as a part of their real estate business. That is, if I, would you. Right. And that phrase is, that phrase is magic, whether it's attraction, whether it is, closing a sale, buyers or with sellers, doesn't matter. It's if I, would you. If I could do this, would you do that? And if the answer is yes, and you get right to the point in the matter, and you find out, is this their real objection or is it not? Because a lot of times they'll say, well, yeah, even if I could do that, that still doesn't really resolve the main issue. Okay, so what's the main issue, right? And I absolutely love that. It's such a powerful question. So please, if you're not, if I, would you, make sure you're putting that into your vernacular. team leads, brokers, make sure you're training on that. So as we get ready to wrap here, because we're running out of time, let's talk about a little bit of objection handling as well. I love the if I would you. Are there any other kind of go-tos that you use for objection handling, or when things get dicey, to help kind of overcome that and move the conversation along and get you that listing?
If we're speaking specifically with sellers on the objection handling, I guess the one thing that I listen very clearly to what it is they're asking, but I have this unique approach of just getting to work for them, right? And I'll say, for example, do you mind, if they're not ready to sign the agreement at that time, or they want to hold off, I'll say, is this, what is the issue in which we need to get solved? Can I help you solve that issue? Can I get back to you, right? Well, I don't really can't ask. I just do it. I say, I'll get back to you Thursday at 3 with an answer to that. Can I market your property internationally, for example? Or can I do this kind of stuff? I'll say, I'll get back to you on these things by 3 o'clock on Thursday. Can you hold off on your decision until then? And they'll be like, sure. And then I just get to work. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I'm working on this. I'm going to get you a net sheet and a marketing plan and a revised version of the listing agreement just to review, with the correct name of the sellers. And what's interesting is they start feeling that desire to serve, and it's harder for them to go away. A lot of times too is I answer a question with a question, right? It'll be like, what is your commission? Right? I'll say, what do you want to pay? What do you know about commission? Right. What is it that you want to do? Because the thing is just because you're asked a question doesn't mean you have to flounder for an answer, right? You just have to be prepared to ask back to get to the nugget of what the concern is, because any kind of objection is usually coming from a place of fear, right? And so you want to understand what that nugget is that you can solve it, right? For example, if they say, do you host open houses? Okay. A lot of times, a lot of agents would say, absolutely, we host open houses. And the client will go, I hate open houses. Yep. And you've just lost it right there.
It's a bait. Yep.
Yeah. So do you host open houses? Would you like me to host open houses? What would you like me to do? So trying to cater and do that kind of thing is important as well, too. They may say, you have too many listings. I used to hear that all the time. And I would be like, you have too many listings. How do I know you're going to focus on mine? I said, I have as many listings as I have because I focus on just the particular part of the transaction that's about contractual negotiation, pricing, and taking care of you. Everything else is handled by my team, transaction coordinators, partners, team agents, things like that go through, because I am at my highest and best when I'm dealing with you as the client, and letting them know that I have an answer to things. So always too, I keep a little notebook in my head of little phrases and things that I like that I've picked up from other people throughout the years. And I'm able to usually pull something out there in the moment. If I really feel like it's a valid objection that I don't have an answer to, one of the things that you can do is just say it. I don't have an answer to that, but I'll find out, and then follow back up with them. Because just that idea of being authentic, genuine, and getting the answer back to them is great. If they're not making a decision and you just feel like you can't get them to make a decision, there's usually something there you don't know about. So after a couple of times of being pushed off on following up, I may say, I feel like there's something we haven't discussed. Would you like to talk to me about it? Because I can help based upon anything that I know, right? And a lot of times they'll start to open up to you about one other thing that's going on with the house that they didn't want to tell you about.
Right. And I'm partial to the feel felt. I think there's two pieces, right? So there's one which is when you say answer a question with a question, sometimes I found a magic phrase on that one, and that's why do you ask, right? As well. Mm-hmm. So when someone says, hey, what do you charge for commission? It's like, why do you ask, right? And then that's when you get to the heart of the issue, and then from there you can have the conversation. Do you do open houses? Well, why do you ask? Because I freaking hate open houses. Okay, well, yeah, no, I hate doing open houses too, so we're in the same boat there, right? So you just have that conversation, asking why they ask. It doesn't seem like you're being, a smart aleck, but it does help you kind of get to what their root question is without being just kind of open-ended. So I love that. And then in the responses, and again, everyone, if you jot this down, is feel, felt, found, right? Feel, felt, found, which is, hey, I understand exactly how you feel. I've had many, many clients that felt the same way, and this is what they found. what they found is that even though I had so many listings, because I'm only focused on the client facing portion, that it makes it such a more beautiful process, and it makes everything more streamlined, right? So it's a feel, felt, found, and you can use it for absolutely anything, right? And it positions you as an expert that's been there before. You've had many, many clients that felt the same way, that are in their exact same boat. So it's relatable. And then it gives them a solution, right, that they can feel comfortable and warm and fuzzy with. So I think we can end on that. What you got?
No, I think that's great. What I would say is to add to that is just be in the moment where you're listening, not thinking about what you're going to reply, right? Because
Exactly.
if you're so focused on what you're going to reply, you're not actually hearing that moment. And that's the important thing too. Is I think that agents are so ready to give an answer that sometimes they need to hear what the real question is, because usually that next question isn't something that is something that could just be addressed later. So
Exactly. Again, it's that why do you ask, right? The first piece of it is why do you ask? The second piece is, hey, I understand how you feel, right? Let's talk about the same level. So I love that, Roddy. Thank you so much for sharing time, wisdom of thousands and thousands and thousands of listing consultations that you've been on. This has been an incredible process. How can someone get a hold of you, right? If someone's in RGV, someone's in South Texas, they want to tap in with you, they want to get even more experience from you, whether they're with EXP or not, how does somebody get a hold of you?
Well, if you're with EXP, please do send me a workplace chat. And if you're not in EXP, then you can just go to my website, which is brokered by EXP, is www.roddydelagarza.com. And it's just like
did
my
you just
name
say
is spelled.
www for real? Did you just
I
like
did.
1990, like 1994?
Hey,
www.
I did my first internet startup in the real estate technology firm in New York in 1993 when everything was dial-up. So I still said the
Okay.
www.
Oh wow. World Wide Web. Okay, cool. So everybody, y'all know me, how to get a hold of me. EXP agents hit me on workplace chat. Everybody else, I'm on whatever social media platform. It's the Tony D King or my website, TonyDKing.com. But you can hit me on any of them, LinkedIn, freaking Facebook, whatever, the Tony D King. Love you all. Thank you so much. And again, we end this like we end every one of them. Drop in the chat your action item. What did you learn today? What are you going to apply to your business today? It's action time, right? Drop into the chat what action you're going to put into place today. We'll give you as late as tomorrow. You got 24 hours to take action on something that Roddy taught you today or that you picked up. So that's it for now. Thank you all so much. God bless and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Tony.